Hello, it's not always easy to criticize or to question big international charities, big organizations that do so much good. And so often, if one does do this, what is remembered is the harm that they might have done recently. A few years ago, I questioned the way Amnesty International worked. A lot of letters went backwards and forwards, and suggesting that I was wrong or that I hadn't looked at the full picture. And then a little later, there was a genuine scandal that other people identified. When there's something that seems wrong, it probably is wrong. And when there is something wrong with a big organization, it's like a sort of canker, as Shakespeare would say, that sort of eats into that organization. And then it's in need of serious overhaul, and too much damage is done. So I think it's important to flag up warning signals, even if it's not going to be popular in the to do that, even if it's not something that people necessarily want to hear. And today there's a report, or in fact it was a few days ago. I paused in talking about this, but there was a report about from the Ukrainian ombudsman, a person called Lyudmila Denisova, who responded to a petition of the 24th of March criticising the International Red Cross for not doing enough to help Ukraine. And specifically, she pointed out that the International Red Cross pulled out of the Mariupol siege prematurely. It didn't engage in hotspots. It failed to help Ukrainian citizens. And instead, it actively helped Russian troops. Now, it's the most recent in a string of allegations levelled against the ICRC by Ukraine. The Ombudsman went much further, and she said she believed that the Red Cross was working in concert with Russia against Ukrainian interests. Now, the International Red Cross is guaranteed by the Geneva Conventions. It was something that came out of the initial Geneva Conventions to work impartially. It was set up in 1863 by a man called Henry Dupont, and there was this committee of 5 in Geneva. They discussed ways to ensure proper medical treatment, proper medical care for those who were injured in war. And it was initially called, I think, the International Senate Committee for the Relief of the Wounded. And it formally began, I think, a year or two later in 1867 with the first Geneva Convention, with those 12 states that signed up to that first Geneva Convention, with the aim to provide relief and to do so with neutrality, and to conduct its affairs under a common banner, which became the Red Cross and then subsequently the Red Crescent. And since, I think, 2006, the Magen David Adam in Israel. Its work is justly celebrated, but it is not without controversy. And I think one shouldn't dismiss the controversy because there may be the opportunity to learn from that, and it may be conceding something bigger. The sexual misconduct in 2015, when 21 staff were dismissed, this suggests a serious need to overhaul the way it works. And throughout the Ukraine war, both sides, in fact, have protested that the ICRC has not been properly neutral. There are stories that it's assisted Russian patriots who forced deportations of Ukrainians across the border to Russia. There was criticism of pictures of the ICRC president, Peter Maurer, meeting Sergei Lavrov in Moscow, but actually he was in Kiev, similarly posing for photographs just a few days earlier. Under the Geneva Convention, civilians have a right to food, water, and medical care. They also have a right to leave the conflict zone, something that has been repeatedly failing in the Ukraine crisis. And it's something which I think must be levelled against the Putinists from the Kremlin and their stooges in the Donbass. The ICRC, they apparently knew of abuse in Abu Ghraib, and they tried to negotiate rather than call out the abuse. They were less reticent, of course, when it came to abuse in Yugoslavia, and they certainly called out the detention and the inhumane treatment of civilians. In Rwanda, I think it was more cautious about using the term genocide, and I think certainly in the last 20 years, it's been it's erred on the side of caution. I think an international organisation of the sort that the International Red Cross is should be fairly proactive. Of course, there are organisations like Amnesty that should be working alongside the International Red Cross, but as I said at the beginning, Amnesty is also itself compromised. We possibly need a rigorous overhaul of these international charities. We are still encouraging people to give money to them, and yet they are clearly organisations with clay feet. We need to ensure that those organisations that are helping us and helping those who are too weak to help themselves are fit for purpose and are genuinely neutral and genuinely caring, and that they cannot be engaged and exploited by particular sides in a conflict. So any sort of concern must be examined seriously.